Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with another video. Today is the first part of my March wrap-up. I'm going to do two videos because I read a ton this month. In this video, I'm going to be talking about fantasy, science fiction, graphic novels. My next video, which should go live next week, will include horror, mysteries, and thrillers, so stay tuned for that. But otherwise, let's jump in. First, I want to talk fantasy, and the first thing I read was actually a reread, and that was the first season of The Wizard Killer by Dreece. This is a serialized fantasy set in a post-apocalyptic world where a main character wakes up, doesn't really know where he is, but he wakes up to find a knife plunged into his chest, and the story takes off from there. The first season really involves him trying to figure out what's going on and understanding the world around him. As a serial, what I mean is that it has really short chapters, each one ending on a bit of a cliffhanger, and it's going to make you keep reading. It's incredibly short and just easy to fly through. I always recommend this to people who are in reading slumps or need something really fast and fun to get through. It's perfect for a readathon. And I've become super obsessed with it. So the reason I reread it this month is because the author actually so kindly provided me with an early copy of the second season, The Wizard Killer, which is out in April, and it was just as good as I hoped it was going to be. If you love season 1, you've got to check out season 2. It was super fun. Again, more addicting episodes. It's got a great witty humor to it, and it's got just a little bit of dark and grit, and I just love this series. I think Dreece is the master when it comes to writing in a serialized form, and I just want him to write everything as serials because I think it is brilliant. He's talked about doing a space opera, which sounds amazing, so please do that, Dreece. I really want to see that. Now, because I love those books so much, the author Dreece did offer to send me e-copies of his other series to have me check out, and I did agree to it because I wanted to see more of what his writing was like. And so I read all 5 published books in his other series, which is called The Yellow Hoods. This is a YA series that almost starts out as middle grade but does become more adult and older with each book, and it's a cross between steampunk and fairy tales where it really takes a lot of the tropes from traditional fairy tales and turns them on their heads. I've done a whole review of this one, so if you're interested in more information, I definitely recommend checking it out. But if you're a fan of middle grade or YA fantasy, it's definitely a really good one to pick up. Honestly, it's a little bit out of my personal reading scope. It's not something I normally reach for, is YA fantasy, but it was still really enjoyable. I definitely appreciate it and think that if it is your thing, this is definitely one that you'd enjoy. The other fantasy I read this month was actually a novella, which I read for the BookTube SFF Awards, and that was Every Heart is a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. And this has been getting tons of buzz around BookTube, but if you haven't heard of it, the premise was really cool. This book centers around a home where children go after they return back from going through other portals and doorways. So think about what would happen when the kids came back from Narnia or other stories like that. And they have a lot of trouble coping in the real world. So this home is a place for them to come to terms with that and find people in similar situation. Again, the premise was super cool, but I honestly didn't love the novella as much as I wish I had. I found the characters to be super flat, and I just never really got invested or immersed in the story. I just thought it was okay. I really do appreciate the fact that it included an asexual character as well as other sexual identities being featured in it. But as a story, it was pretty mediocre. I gave it about 3 or 3.5 stars. So not the best. I can't really recommend that one. It just wasn't my favorite. Next, I have to talk science fiction, and I read The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky. This is a BookTube favorite, but if you haven't heard of it, it's about a crew on a spaceship where they are employed to build roads between planets to make space travel faster, essentially building some sort of wormhole. And the story is less so about what they're doing and more so about the characters themselves. If you enjoy space opera that is heavily character focused, this is definitely one to pick up. It involved a wide variety of characters that were diverse in terms of sexuality and family structures, and the aliens were just so alien, and I really appreciated that the humans in this universe were not the center of it, but were actually considered to be pretty insignificant species, and I thought the entire book was really interesting. It is a much slower paced read than I normally would pick up. It doesn't have a lot of plot pushing it forward, but despite that, I did read it quite quickly and found it very engrossing. I love the characters, particularly the aliens. I had a lot of favorites, and this book includes an AI character, which I absolutely loved and really gave me a lot of feels similar to playing the game Mass Effect, which I've been loving lately. So if you're a fan of that video game, I definitely recommend checking out this book. Now, the other sci-fi book I read this month was VN by Madeline Ashby, and this was recommended on the podcast Fangirl Happy Hour. Renee read it and absolutely loved it. Highly recommend that podcast, by the way. I'm going to link that down below. But this is a story about a future where AI and organic life are intermixed, basically live somewhat in harmony, although there's definitely some discrimination. And this book, in a lot of ways, delves into the question of what makes a person real. Can artificial intelligence be considered real life, or are they just machines? Do they have true emotions? It's a very thought-provoking, futuristic book, and I found it super compelling. The actual plot is super crazy. It's about a young AI girl who essentially eats her own grandmother in order to protect her family and has to go on the run from there. It's very twisty and turny. It definitely has a young adult feel to it because the main character is very naive, but it, as you can imagine, has some kind of gross cannibalistic aspects to it, and I really enjoyed those gruesome aspects as well as these thought-provoking larger themes of personhood and what does it mean to be an artificial intelligence. And I personally love stories with AI, so that alone made me really enjoy it. So if you're a fan of AI stories, this is one to pick up as well. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I will be continuing on with the rest of her series. The last book, the third, I believe, comes out this year, which I'm very excited about. Finally, I want to talk about the 3 graphic novels I read, the first one being Monstress by Marjorie. And honestly, I'm having a lot of trouble summarizing this book because I found it very complex and confusing. All the chapter breaks included cats trying to explain the complexities of the world. And I always feel that if a book has to stop and explain itself, that's not a good sign. While I kind of struggled with the plot itself, the artwork was stunning. I loved the way it was done. It was very detailed and the coloring was amazing. I also appreciated that the story had a lot of horror aspects. There were some really gruesome, dark moments, and I love those elements in the story. It was definitely a darker read. And while I loved it, at the end of the day, I can barely tell you what it's about, which is problematic. I read it because it was nominated as a BookTube SFF shortlist. And needless to say, that one is not going to get my vote because I was not as impressed with it. It didn't live up to the hype that everyone else seems to have about it. Next, I read a book called Norman by Silas, and this is a graphic novel about a young elementary school boy who decides to murder people. And so it's about this sadistic child, which the premise alone had me completely hooked. I was very interested in it. And the entire book is written in this really cartoony, cute style. The artwork is really adorable and it looks like it's written for kids, but it is definitely not. It's super adult. There's definitely adult themes all throughout it. It's crazy and appropriate, and it was a lot of fun to read. I only gave it 3.5 stars because while I enjoyed it, I felt the plot was a little bit convoluted and the narrative was a little bit off for whatever reason. I didn't quite love it, but I loved what it was trying to do so much that I still rounded that up to 4 stars on Goodreads. It's still one to pick up, maybe if you can get it from your library. I enjoyed it. It was dark and creepy, and evil kids are just so much fun. So if you're into that, you'll probably want to pick this one up too. Last graphic novel I read this month was also my personal favorite, and that is The Kate by Joe Hill. I'm finding that I really enjoy Joe Hill's graphic novels. I would love him to do more. This is about a man who has a difficult life. Things aren't always going well for him. He had an accident in his childhood, which makes it hard for him to work. And things aren't going well. He's struggling to get along with his girlfriend. And then one day he finds his childhood blanket, which he used to use as a cape, and when he tries it on again, he realizes that it might have some magical powers to it. I don't want to say more than that because this book does not go where you would expect, and I think it's best to find out for yourself, and I just love this one. It was so dark though, like grim dark, so it is depressing and everything gritty. Easily one of the darkest graphic novels I've read in recent history, and if you're up for that, this is definitely one to pick up. If you're not sure about it, it might be one to skip, but I found it just super dark in a really good way. Joe Hill just isn't afraid to go there and just really push the boundaries when it comes to storytelling. It's not so much horror, but it's got some definitely dark fantasy elements, which I really enjoy when Joe Hill brings in a bit of fantasy into his work. And this is a fantastic, fantastic graphic novel. So that's everything for this wrap up. As always, share your thoughts down below if you've read any of these books or which ones you plan on picking up. Otherwise, I'll talk to you next week with the second part. Thanks so much for watching. Okay, bye-bye.